Hi everyone, Sajid Amit here, and welcome to my review of the Campfire Audio Clara, which is an IM that is a collaboration, a wonderful collaboration with Alessandro Cortini of Nine Inch Nails fame. Guys, so this Clara is of course something that I've been using for a bit of time, and I love it, and I think it's very pretty. The tips are not stock tips. The cable is not a stock cable. And right here you have the Campfire Astro Lit, which has till date been my favorite Campfire IM. So I thought this comparison might be useful, but of course this is not just a comparison video, it's also generally a review of the Campfire Audio Clara. I have in front of me a bunch of different sources. I have the FIO BTR7, which is a wonderful Bluetooth dongle, a Sony W1ZM2, which is my favorite DAP, and it's in a stock leather carrying case. And of course, I have this DX260, the Ibasso DS260, which is a wonderful, not so expensive DAP, around $1,000. It's pocket friendly and very powerful and awesome overall in terms of sonics. And I'll talk more about these sources. So, this, as I said, is produced by Campfire Audio in along with musician Alessandro Cortini, and this has a new dual neo-magnet 10 mm dynamic driver with biocellulose diaphragm design, and that is something that I think is a new design, and the bass frequencies generated by this driver is impressive, because to my mind there is a certain amount of authenticity to the bass replay of the Clara, which I'm absolutely smitten with, because see, I am a bit of an audiophile bass head. I like bass first IMs, but I'm not one of those who can live just without a mid-range and treble excellence. I need mid-range excellence, I need treble excellence, and I need supreme level of bass excellence, right? So I just want to first say that this satisfies the criteria, but having said that, I mean, because the Astrolit was my favorite IM until now, and this is also not a stock cable, I just want to point out that, this IM, although this has more ginormous bass, the Astrolit, and I've talked about this in review, and a lot of you have bought the Astrolit on my recommendation. It's got planar bass, it's got dual planar drivers, and this punches so hard that this, I think, can replace the trifecta for you, the Campfire trifecta, which is a very famous, popular, and yet divisive IM. Okay, so this, I'm arguing, can replace this Astrolit for you as well. All this more balanced tuning, so I'll talk more about that. But let's just first go through the specs on the, I have the website in front of me. So like I said, it's got new dual neo-magnet 10 mm dynamic drivers with biocellulose diaphragm design. It's got about one Knowles dual diaphragm mid-BA and one Knowles dual tweeter. And as may be evident, this has this very beautiful semi-clear blue polymer. They call it a monolithic shell. And it comes with this new smoky jacket time stream cable. You get a 3.5 mm and a 4 mm connection. You can get a titanium edition for about $1,000 more, and it looks pretty. And I can't say for sure if the titanium edition sounds very different, although it's $1,000 more. But I can say that this sounds amazing. And the titanium edition is limited to 50 sets, so I'm not sure if the titanium edition is available anymore. So that's it, guys, for the specs and all that, right? It's like I said, its build quality is fantastic, as might be evident. It does look very premium. The semi see-through blue resin looks very premium, and I'm using it with the double flange tips from SpinFit. You can of course tune the sound with a variety of tips. I'm not using the stock cable because I'm not a huge fan of the time stream cable, but a lot of people love it because it's flat. I just think this looks prettier. This is, a different cable. It's an upgrade cable. I'll talk more about this cable later. So, guys, I know you're here to discuss the sound, but before that, maybe I should also talk about how easy it is to drive. It's got an impedance, a sensitivity of 94 dB, and a 13 ohm impedance, which is to say that this has very low impedance, and this will pick up a hiss, a waterfall hiss, on a variety of sources. So you want to be careful about the source you use with this, because this will pick up hiss. Like even on the Sony DAP, which is not very powerful, I get on high gain a very slight amount of hiss. It's not extremely audible. It goes away when the music is playing, but it does require that sort of source or an IE match or other kinds of impedance adapters, which you can find out about on the HeadFi Clara thread. And I'll leave a link to the HeadFi Clara thread so you can check it out and see the discussion on how to drive this. Like, I don't want this to be a headache for you guys. You can drive it off anything, and even with the Sony on high gain, it's not like you get a lot of hiss. It's an ever so slight amount of tiny waterfall hiss, which goes away when I put the Sony on low gain. Even with my DAP here, I don't always get hiss, honestly. Like, it really depends on the gain, so that's worth keeping in mind. Okay, now this comes with the premium box, which I'm not going to show you on this review. I'll drop a picture of this, and I'll leave a link to the picture of this in the description section of this video. I do want to talk about the sound of this first and foremost, because it does sound magnificent. Guys, if you're coming from the Trifecta or the Astrolith or any one of those IMs from the Chromatic series, what's worth keeping in mind is that this IM is, I think, to my mind, a lot more balanced and warmer. So if you like warmth, if you're sensitive to treble, this perhaps is the least offensive in the treble in comparison to the Astrolith or the Trifecta or the Bonneville or any one of those IMs. The treble here is very gentle. You do get a certain amount of energy, but it's pretty even-handed between 2 kilohertz to all the way up to air frequencies around 9 or 10 kilohertz. So there's no absence of energy per se, so you do get a fair amount of attack and bite of cymbals, of electric guitars. The vocals are relatively forward without being very forward. It doesn't have the sort of level of pinna gain relative to its bass shelf that I think a lot of other Harman-tuned IMs do. And what's good about Campfire is that they don't really try to live up to Harman targets, not because it's impossible. It's honestly a target that anyone can do. But Campfire has very creative takes on tuning, and this, from what I understand, Ken Ball tuned in concert, no pun intended, with Alessandro, and over a series of takes and retakes until he got the tuning right. And Alessandro's taste is fabulous and phenomenal, because I love the tuning here, guys. I would say it's, again, a bassy IM with a bass that slopes a little upwards from sub bass to mid bass and has energy up all the way up until 100 hertz. So you get a fair amount of bass presence with an ever so slight emphasis on mid over sub, while it extends really, really well. And then it comes down in the upper mids at the appropriate point without any honk or whatsoever. And then you get a certain amount of pinna gain from 1 to 2 kilohertz. It's not recessed in that region. And you get another sort of, level of energy, upward movement of the frequency graph between 2 and 3 kilohertz. So it does have a couple of mounds in the pinna gain region. And ever so slight recession between 2 and 3 kilohertz, which I think gives it a sense of stage. Okay, so that's what it's tuned to sound like. And if you're wondering about how it compares with the Astrolith is interesting because it has a flatter bass. And by dint of that flatness, you perceive a little more sub-bass kick on the Astrolith compared to the Clara. But the Astrolith is also slightly more V-shaped with, a lot more energy in the air frequencies. So it sounds, in a certain sense, wider. But this sounds deeper, and this is more rumbly and overall more exciting, excitable, dynamic, and overall more fun. Now, this is an IM that you want to tune with different kinds of things. Like, of course, cables are very subjective, and cables don't often make a huge amount of difference for everyone. I have perceived differences in cables, but of course not with majority of my cables, with some IMs and some cables. And I'll get into that later. I've already talked about it in several reviews if you want to look up my view on cables. But with all that being said, you can tweak this with tips substantially and bring out more treble or more bass if that's what your jam is. You can, of course, use different sources to make it sound different. So, for example, when I use my FIO BTR7 dongle, which it does pair exceedingly well with, it sounds nice because the FIO has a bit of a sharp treble and it's analytical sounding, so they do combine very well to sound very snappy, and it in a certain sense, wakes up the Clara, and it's a wonderful synergy. And as a matter of fact, honestly, I feel like sometimes that these two can be an end game for someone because they just synergize very well. The thing with the FIO BTR7 is that when it does synergize with something like the Clara or even the IE900, it just hits it out of the park. Otherwise, it can sound very metallic also, right? Because this has the timbre that it does, the cohesiveness that it does, and the warmth that it does. I think it synergizes very well. With the Sony W1ZM2, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this for everyone unless you are someone who's very experienced with tip rolling, because the Sony makes the Clara sound huge, very huge, wide and deep, very warm, engaging, all-encompassing, engrossing, but you do miss the ever so slight amount of the last sort of leg of incisiveness, right? It does take away the incisive factor from the Clara just a little bit, which might be exactly what you want, but I like incisive sounds, guys. And I also like good timbre, so I'm sort of someone who likes the possible combination of timbre with dynamism and incisiveness. This is another very good combination because this is a slightly more Delta Sigma sounding DAP compared to the Sony. A little more incisive, a little more bright, a little more energetic. So I do like the Clara also with the DX260. As a matter of fact, I like it with my cheaper sources. All that to say, synergy will matter with this. If you want to warm it up even more, you can go the Sony route. If you want to brighten it up, you can go the route of these two other sources I've just shown you. Or you can use a Q-Style CMA18 if you want a more neutral signature. This is something that I think can be not the jack, but almost the king of all trades, because it's very tweakable in its overall sonic presentation. It does nothing wrong and almost everything right, from bass to treble, with great soundstage. And finally, I do want to talk about things like its subjective parameters, like its resolution and slam and imaging and stage. I've already talked about timbre. So this is, a home run for $2,000 across all these parameters, because this does have endgame level of resolution. Now, of course, you might find a Jewel or a Traley or a Subtonic Storm that teases out the last 0.1% of resolution from your music. And that would be fine, but for all practical purposes, it does deliver in terms of resolution. Soundstage wise, it's fairly wide. It's not as wide as the Astrolit, but it's wide enough, and it sounds quite deep and lovely in its depth. Very holographic. Timbre I've talked about, and slam, it does have. I'm a guy who's not going to review an IEM and praise it unless it has slam. So take that for what it's worth. This has slam, approved by Bassset Audiophile Sajid Amit. So it's dynamic. So that's it, guys. It is a wonderful IEM. I currently think that these are Campfire's best two IEMs, right? And you can not go wrong with either. It really depends on whether you want to own both, because they do complement each other well, or whether you want to own the all-rounder or the V-shaped bass monster. It's your call. Thank you for watching. Sajid Amit signing out, and stay tuned for my next one. Bye-bye.